Is this live-action Disney remake worthy enough to be part of your world?
Really?
Welcome to the Cinefanatics. My name's Robert Adams.
I'm Chris Adams.
And today we have a review for the 2023 Little Mermaid. Now, typically this would be around the part of this review where I would say it's a spoiler-free review. It's not really spoiler-free because the original cartoon came out in 1989.
Listen, I hate to break it to you, it's the same movie.
It's the same exact story. So if you saw the 1989, you're already spoiled.
Spoilers, it's the same movie.
So I don't know. There's going to be spoilers, but there's not. Just, well, whatever. We're just going to talk about the movie.
Yeah.
Just follow however you want to follow. Right off the bat, so there's going to be a couple of things with this movie, and we'll probably cover a couple of them in this review that might be a little bit controversial. Definitely there's a stigma around this movie, which we'll get to in a little while, but just keeping that in mind, yeah, we'll cover it. If you're here for that, yeah, just sit tight. But overall, I would say the first and foremost, the number one thing every single person is wanting to know, the eel in the tank, how faithful is this to the original movie? Because that's what everyone wants to know about this movie.
Yeah.
And as someone who grew up with this movie, it is one of my favorite Disney classic animated movies. I'd have to say it was actually pretty faithful to the original.
Surprise!
Yeah, they actually did a decent job with this one.
Yeah. This one actually, like, here's the thing. For me, there's an issue when you're walking into a live-action Disney movie. A lot of them have been, it was fine, I guess. There's a couple of them here and there that are like, it's actually really good. Actually, good job. But most of them usually are pretty middle of the road. They don't do anything spectacular. They don't change up anything enough to really kind of warrant their existence over the original. Example being, if I wanted to watch Lion King, I'm not going to watch the 2019 version. I'm going to watch the 1994 version.
Yeah.
That's just how it is.
Especially like changes made to that movie, yeah, they just weren't important enough. And in some of those changes, in my opinion, like the Simba running back to the Pride Lands after being told by Nala that Scar took over. The movie, the live-action movie, has a Beyonce song. Not a big fan of. I love the song that played in the original animated movie because that just fit the tone of what's going on.
Yeah, so in this situation, the question comes up, does Little Mermaid do the same thing? In a way, here's the thing. I liked it. I'll say it right off the bat. I liked this new Little Mermaid. I thought it was very well done. I still don't know that I would watch this one over the original cartoon if I wanted to watch the Little Mermaid story. And I think there's only a few live-action Disney movies that really actually do that for me in terms of, like, I'll probably watch the live-action Cinderella movie over the animated one. Just so you can kind of get an idea of, like, where at least I'm coming from, because I'll speak for myself here, when it comes to these live-action Disney movies. This one, I don't think that I would watch this one over the cartoon, but I will say, if this one's on, I'm not going to be angry.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's establishing the viewpoint of the person giving the review, I think, is the first key thing in that. And it's not something I would expect out of every review. I don't expect this from every time I'm watching a review for a movie. I don't necessarily every movie need to know that person's background or connection to this movie. But this one, these Disney live-action remakes make sense because there is a nostalgia factor that could be there depending on the age of the person who's watching it or reviewing it.
We were both a lot younger in the 90s, in this case, the late 80s. I wasn't alive yet, or I was born the same year.
You were born the year it came out, yeah.
You were a child, so like these late 80s, early 90s Disney movies have a special place to us because of our age back when they came out.
And that being said, we're going to probably be a lot harsher on this than someone who may not have grown up with these movies.
How do we feel about the movies that we grew up with being adapted to film? Do we feel like they were adapted correctly? Do we like the direction they took in some ways, and other ways, all these kinds of things. So for us to say all that and to say they actually did a pretty good job with this movie, I actually really did enjoy it. I think is actually really high praise for this film.
Yeah. Just because that's a part of my it's a part of my world. It's a part
okay.
of my life. There is a part of my childhood that was spent watching The Little Mermaid. And I really enjoyed watching The Little Mermaid. I was probably 8 years old when I came out, and after watching this movie, I was all into the Disney musicals. I loved the aesthetic of the look, because this was the first movie that brought on the new renaissance of Disney animated movies. And then also
Peak Disney.
And then also 8-year-old me had some kind of obsession over purple seashells for some weird reason. I don't know why. But
Demolition Man?
Oh yeah, that's right. Demolition Man that came out in 93 or whatever. Anyways, yeah, so kind of like what you're saying, yes. For me to be someone who loved the original, to say that this is faithful and I like what they did with this movie, that is extremely high praise.
Yeah.
Easily.
And there's a lot of fun stuff. I mean, going back even to the music from the original being brought back, and some of it being modernized, there being some new songs added, but obviously the classics are still here. Some of them. Some of them being changed up a little bit too.
There were a couple that were just completely removed altogether, especially Le Poisson, the one where the chef Louis, I believe is his name, is trying to chase after Sebastian in the royal kitchen. So that was all completely eliminated, which, I mean, I get, but I mean, that was also a fun scene. Yeah, it really wasn't needed in the original either. It was just a little side quest for Sebastian to be on.
But you're part of that world. You're under the seas.
Do it now. Oh, you're talking about the actual songs.
I'm actually talking about the songs, you numbskull. Yeah, the actual big classics, these are songs that stand the test of time and are iconic for the Disney brand in general, not just Little Mermaid. I think all of them were presented very faithfully.
Yeah.
The musical sequences, especially with Under the Sea, I thought was one of my favorites. The whole ocean life, all the little creatures and everything coming to life and dancing around, I thought was a really, really high note for.
They didn't do it the same way that they did in the cartoon. In the cartoon,
I don't want them to.
The ocean life was a lot more animated. They all were very aware that they were cartoons. So when they say the slugs cut a rug, the cartoon actually showed slugs dancing. Yeah. They didn't do that necessarily in this movie, but they did show all these beautiful, colorful sea creatures are all coming together. It was a lot slower in this than in the original.
Yeah.
There was a part of especially Under the Sea, when they started performing it, I was like, where's all the other sea creatures? Why is it just Sebastian Flounder? And I think Scuttle was actually a part of that song too for some weird reason. Why are they the only ones singing the song? But then all the other sea creatures came in by the end. I was like, okay, cool. It worked. It definitely worked. It was beautiful. It worked great.
I just like the little sea turtles bopping.
Yeah. It's the same kind of in the previous Disney live-action movies. You had the Be Our Guest with Beauty and the Beast. Same kind of song.
Yeah.
Friend Like Me from Aladdin. Or also kind of like Prince Ali. It's these big production numbers that has everyone involved singing and dancing. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I thought it was done very well.
A couple other songs were added into this film as well, done by Lin-Manuel Miranda. You can tell they're done by Lin-Manuel Miranda, which is...
Especially the Scuttlebutt.
Yeah, the Scuttle's got a nice little rap in there that was definitely 100% written by Lin-Manuel Miranda. You can tell. And I'm not complaining about that. I love Lin-Manuel Miranda. I think he does good music.
There were some changes made to this movie. Added songs removed. There was some parts that were added to the storyline. Namely, I think probably the biggest addition was Eric's mom. Mm-hmm. Eric's mom was not a part of the original cartoon. She was added in, and she kind of brought in with her a storyline. She very much reminded me of Ramonda in the Black Panther movies. Yeah. She is the older, wiser, sees all, knowing things, and she's trying to impart that knowledge onto her children, who are also in a position of leadership, because this is all a royal family. And one of the things that she ends up having to deal with is, for a while, she's dealing with how she feels that her country's being shunned by the sea gods, because they can't get any of their trade ships to survive. They're all getting wrecked. And
with Triton's point of view, this is a very Romeo and Juliet kind of situation.
Yeah. There's definitely a lot of this where they are purposely putting even more than the original cartoon. They're putting the humans versus the mer people.
Yeah.
At odds against each other, even though for the most part, at least one side of it doesn't actually believe that the other side exists.
Which I think actually was like a good piece to add to it. I think it makes sense for the story. And again, like most of these Disney live actions, I am looking for something a little bit extra for the movie to add that is different from the originals. Justify this movie's existence to me by adding something that makes it a variation of what we've gotten before. So I think something like that really goes a long way with me in particular.
And this did add to it without detracting from the story of the movie. And I was okay with it. The other thing about this, thinking about it now in hindsight, looking at it, is, and it's actually kind of funny, given all the controversy and everything that was surrounding this movie, specifically around when Halle Bailey was announced to be playing Errolowl, it also kind of feels like that this was something, the idea between the humans and the mer people was something that was added in by Disney to be like, hey, shut the hell up, everyone.
Yeah.
These are people who don't like each other, and they end up being able to socialize and mingle by the end of the movie. If you have a problem with any part of this movie, learn to be a better person and adapt. That's what they're doing.
Their whole thing was like, there's just been a big misunderstanding between us, essentially. Which I think is great commentary for real life, wherein there's a lot of misunderstanding between different people, different groups, different ways of life. Mm-hmm. And I think this movie actually did a good job kind of leaning into that and saying like, hey, this is actually like, look, we know, okay, first of all, it's Disney, it's a big corporation, blah, 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 we get it. They're churning out, movies left and right, trying to make the buck. But at the same time, movies can, regardless if they're made by a big corporation or not, can still speak to true life, real life, what's going on in the world and everything. And sometimes, is the casting in a certain way forced or pushed specifically to make a statement? It can be. That's not necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah. So speaking of that, getting into the cast, I would say in general, the entire cast does a good job.
Absolutely.
Some more than others. Obviously, like Javier Bardem as Triton, he works, he comes in, he reads his lines, he does a good job, and then swims away. Like, that is...
I expect more from Javier Bardem, but I guess for what was necessary for Triton in the story, like, they gave him a good arc, a good character arc, but it really wasn't anything more than what than Triton in the original cartoon. He did roughly what Triton did in the cartoon, and that's really all I'm looking for in these live action. Yeah.
At least hit the bar that the cartoon did, and that was fine.
I feel like they casted him because they needed someone who could speak with authority and gravitas, and
which
Javier
he
Bardem can do that. But also, there just wasn't much to what his character really needed. He was very much kind of one note, so to speak.
Yeah, even in the original cartoon, you don't get like any real change in him until he goes back to make that bargain with Ursula, like, hey, take me instead of Errolowl.
Right.
And that's where we really get to see a completed character arc, a turn, because until then, the whole movie, he's like, no, you stay away from the surface people. I forbid it. I hit my microphone. Like, that's what he's bringing, that intensity he's bringing to the movie. So I do like, they did that very well.
Speaking of Ursula, Melissa McCarthy, she did a good job. I mean, we're talking about someone who came in and did what needed to be done for the role of Ursula. I think Melissa McCarthy did a very good job. The thing is, I don't think she applied to Ursula no one else could have played Ursula but Melissa McCarthy. She did such a fantastic job. I feel like that role really the way it was written, could have been portrayed by almost anyone they wanted to cast for that role.
Yeah, and that's what I was saying. Like, when this was first announced, my first thought, like, if I was fantasy dream casting this movie, my first go-to was going to be Melissa McCarthy.
Yeah.
And then I was actually, like, I would have gone between Melissa McCarthy or, like, maybe Rebel Wilson. Mm-hmm. I still think Melissa McCarthy does a phenomenal job, and she did exactly what I was imagining her to do. When I would imagine fan casting her as Ursula, this is what I was expecting her to do, and she nailed it perfectly.
Yeah. And then, of course, the other two, actually, there's a few others you want to talk about. Obviously, Awkwafina's a Scuttle. She was being Awkwafina. And then you've got Daveed Diggs as Sebastian. Fantastic job. I thought he portrayed Sebastian very well.
The animation on Sebastian was a little weird, but yeah.
He's a realistic looking crab with some like animated features, sure. And then Jacob Tremblay as Flounder was perfectly fine.
Which he sounded, that one was weird because he both sounded exactly like younger Jacob Tremblay, which he's not anymore. And he's
been developed for a while.
And he's also sounds like Flounder from the original. So that was great. Ooh, can't talk. That was great casting on that part as well. And that's just voice casting.
And then of course you've got Errolowl and Eric, which both excellent job. I think both of them portrayed those roles in a very theatrical way, which did a lot for me, because when you're doing a musical, I want those characters to be loud, boisterous, and very theatrical in their presentation.
Absolutely. I was trying to remember Eric's name, Jonah Howard King.
Yeah.
I haven't seen him in too much of anything, so that's why I'm looking up his name. But yeah, I think he did a great job. Again, not knowing anything about him before this movie, this is the first time, for all intents and purposes, I'm introduced to him as an actor, and I think he nailed this role perfectly. He looked like Eric.
He looked like Eric. He just portrayed Eric very well. And then of course you got Halle Bailey as Errolowl, and I think she just absolutely nailed the role. She's got a powerful voice. And
yes.
There's a reason why they went with her for this role, is because she belted out those songs perfectly.
The reprise of Part of Your World, the one that the famous scene,
The Rock.
Yeah, with her on the rock and she pushes up as all the water splashes behind her. That whole shot and her singing, chills.
Yeah.
That's goosebump material right there. That is like, you freaking nailed it right there, right off the bat. Just loved it. Definitely has the voice for the character. Her portrayal, and yes, I am
her characterization.
Her portrayal was phenomenal.
Yeah.
She did wonderful. The way that she played this character, absolutely nailed it. I loved her as Errolowl.
Yep.
Now, to talk about the controversy parts of this.
I'm excuse myself.
The thing that we're seeing, and that like anyone who's reviewing this movie is like, I really don't want to review this movie. I don't want to talk about this because we know how YouTube commenters can be. We're in a damned if you do, damned if you don't type of position. And that is, if you like Errolowl and Halle Bailey playing,
You use a stupid W word that doesn't make any sense.
yeah, you're a woke shill.
Oh, there it is.
Yeah. Or if you don't like her, you're racist.
I liked her.
You woke shill.
Disney isn't giving me any money. Deal with it.
Here's the point of view
wish they were.
That is the conversation, as the way the internet, Twitter seems to be having it.
Goofy.
Here's what I'm going to add to it. There is a middle ground in there. There is something that is not a part of either one of those conversations, and I want to say this is probably where I lie in this opinion. When you do something like remake a classic cartoon, people want to see what they're used to translated one for one on screen. For example, anyone who's been on, like, say, Facebook, you may have come across, there's like artist renditions, probably from like DeviantArt or something, someone drawing the Family Guy or Simpsons cartoons in live action.
Creepy.
They absolutely 100% creepy as hell. But they keep it somewhat faithful. If they're drawing a live action Homer, he still has yellow skin, the wisps of hair, the weird 5 o'clock shadow, the big bulgy eyes.
Yeah.
Creepy still, but nonetheless accurate. And that's what I would say I'd want to see. I want to see what I was used to seeing just in a live action. And that's the only thing I want to see changed, is just the animation to live action.
You just want you're going into a live action movie going, give me a 1-to-1.
Yeah.
And that's
And
hard
that's
to
fine.
that's hard to reproduce sometimes, because a lot of the situations are they need to change up something for the movie in live action in order to make it work in live action. I do want to see these movies lean more into the respecting their animated roots.
Yeah.
But sometimes you don't always get that.
And that's fine. I think that's an okay, that right there, if that is your viewpoint and that's your only viewpoint, that's an okay viewpoint to have. There's nothing wrong with that. That's what I would think anyone who wants to see stuff from their past translated.
Yeah.
Like there's another Ninja Turtles movie coming out. I'm going to judge that based on my childhood experience with Ninja Turtles. So
Yeah.
that's the point that I think no one ever talks about in these comparisons. Now, aside from that, how do I feel about Halle Bailey? I think she did a good job. I think she did exactly what she needed to do.
She was phenomenal. She sang the songs well. Her characterization, her portrayal was excellent.
Her acting was on point.
She was Ariel to me.
I mean, if the only reason that you don't like this movie is because Ariel has black skin, you need to get over yourself. There's more things about her specifically that were good than maybe not translating the character from the cartoon 100%. That at the end of the day, that did not matter to me.
And the movie portrayed a fictional world where it does make sense for a lot of these characters to have different skin tones because they're all coming from different locations. For instance,
the sisters.
Triton's daughters, all of them portrayed almost all of them portrayed a different race from a different location in the world because they were all supposed to represent the seven seas. They were all supposed to represent different parts of the world. We don't know how the biology of mermaids works. They're a fictional species of being. But at the same time, yeah, exactly. Don't worry about it. At the same time, it's cool to see all these different cultures represented in the ocean that spreads across the entire world. The entire globe is represented in this movie, and I think that's actually very well done and does actually make logical sense based on the story as presented. So anybody who's sitting there going, no, they all need to be white, doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense because we're talking about the entire world.
Yeah.
The entire world isn't white.
And that's only if you're going to be the type of person that you are holding on to that nostalgia of the original movie. Well, they were white in the original movie. They need to be white in this one. Again, get over that.
Yeah.
Because, yes, this
move past
in
it.
the context of this and how that was setting up, that made sense. And it worked very well.
Yeah.
So I liked it. I had no problem with any of the changes that they made as far as the casting goes. And I think that's about all we need to actually say about that.
Now, if you want to hear us find something about this movie that we didn't like, there are some things. A lot of the underwater scenes, a lot of them bright and colorful, but a lot of them are presented the same way we saw in the trailer, which was it's a lot of darkness because underwater the sun obviously doesn't reach down into the depths, and so there's a lot of shade, there's a lot of like darkness
into the fathoms below.
The thing about it for me is that it's a fictional world, it's a fictional movie, mermaids aren't real. Give us an environment that we as the audience and moviegoer can see in. We don't need to not be able to see the things that are on the screen. So there are moments where it was just a little too dark, where I think, based on the fact, again, respect your animated roots, you can make it colorful, you can make it brighter, you can make it, you can give us kind of a more extravagant look. Again, like Under the Sea, that whole section, perfect. I kind of wanted that throughout the whole movie. Obviously, the sections with Ursula, she's the bad person in the movie. It's going to be darker in her cavern.
Mm-hmm.
You can lighten it up just a little bit more while still maintaining that effect.
And the original cartoon did have shadowy areas, but those shadowed areas were a lot more hard. The Little Mermaid is a feast for the eyes as far as color and saturation goes.
Underwater is a mystery world full of color and wonder, and we like to see that represented on screen too.
Yeah, and then just in general, the underwater in this movie, the problem that this movie faces is we've been inundated lately with tons of underwater movies. Aquaman, Wakanda Forever.
Yeah.
Probably some kind of Avatar-like movie, if I'm remembering correctly.
This is the way.
This is the way of water. Yeah. We've gotten these movies that have shown us underwater scenes that looked much better than this movie portrayed. Mm-hmm. It's just, there was something lacking here. At certain times, this movie just looked like they were actors on a set and they somehow managed to get their hair to wave like the hair was underwater. Yeah. And that was the only real indication that this movie takes place under the sea.
Which, for this movie, of course, the visual effects artists are working overtime because this whole movie is just you can't do this movie without visual effects.
Yeah.
And all of that. But outside of that, the only other thing that I would say that was kind of off in places was a little bit of the pacing. Much like this review, there's moments where it kind of slows down a little bit, and you got to pick up the pace. That's the same thing for this movie. There was moments where it just kind of meandered a little bit through different scenes, and it's like, I feel like this movie could have cut probably about 20 minutes off of its runtime, maybe about an hour 50 or something total, and it probably would have been perfectly fine. As it stands, I think the movie was still great. I just think that there's just a couple moments where it was just like, okay, I understand the purpose of this scene. Let's carry on.
Yeah. So it was kind of drawn out a bit. Yeah. Otherwise, yeah, I really want to say that's probably like most of my negative opinions were those two things.
Yeah.
A little bit of the graphics, like I said, there were some cases I thought Sebastian looked a little weird, but that's what everyone is saying, so I feel like I'm just a part of the it crowd with that one.
He was fine.
Yeah.
It's for the kids.
Yeah, and that's the other thing to keep in mind with this is this is a movie geared towards kids. Yes, I know a lot of people are going to ask, well, why did two grown adult men go see this movie? Well, because one, we run a movie YouTube channel.
Hi, welcome to our YouTube channel. We watch movies here.
And then two, kind of like what I said, I grew up with this movie. I want to see it translated in a live action setting. There's nothing wrong with that, and I don't care about your judgment.
And this movie's also been in the work for the last 5 years. So.
Yeah, this movie's been one that the second I heard they were doing this, I'm like, all right, let's see what you do. And now we finally got to that day.
Yeah.
So I'm pleasantly happy with it. I approve. As someone, again, big fan of the original cartoon, I thought they did very well on this. I think if we're going to rank this out of 10, I mean, I'm actually probably going to give it an 8.
That's funny because I'm kind of in the 7.5 range.
That makes sense.
I'm in the 7.5 range just because there's a couple things that are detracting it from me, but it's still, again, in terms of being a live action Disney remake, I think it's on the more positive side of these than really the negative side.
Yeah. So anyways, that's going to be our review for this movie. What did you think of this movie? If you can be mature about it, feel free to comment down below in the comments. Please keep everything nice and just be a good person. As one of my favorite YouTubers says, be good people. Please keep that in mind. If I see something that is not, I'm probably going to delete it. So please just save us all a whole bunch of hassle and time. Anyways, while you're down there, make sure you hit that like button. Hit the dislike if you want, I guess. It just helps us with the interaction.
And it all helps us. Your comments and your dislikes, it all helps us. Go for it.
I mean, do whatever you want, honestly. But hit the like button and also hit the subscribe button if you want to see more of our content as we are releasing more and more content coming up. Tomorrow night, we are doing our tier ranking show. It's a live show called The Marquee. We will be tier ranking all of the live action Disney remakes up until now, so including The Little Mermaid. So if you want to know where your favorites may land, like Aladdin, or if you happen to like the emotionless 2019 Lion King, come find out where it's going to land in our tier ranking. That's going to be tomorrow night. That will be at 7:30 Pacific, 10:30 Eastern. So come back to this channel and come watch us hang out, give your opinion live in the chat. Otherwise, you can follow us at The Cinefanatics on Twitter and Instagram. You can follow me personally at RobertAdamsMLP on Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd, and YouTube.com/@RobertAdamsMLP.
And you can follow me at ChrisAdamsMLP on Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd, as well as Twitch.tv/ChrisAdamsMLP.
Yep. Anyways, that's going to do it for this review. Thank you for watching. We will see you on the next one, or hopefully we'll see you tomorrow night. Goodbye.
For the 1,000th time, Disney, make Atlantis live action. It's the only one I really want.
Still need to watch the animated version of that.
Atlantis.